Welcome back, guys. Now we're really getting into World War I today. We did the introduction, so you need to get out your note packet. Just below this map you created, it says, who's the leader of Germany in 1914? That's where we're going to begin today. So, let's look at this. A little review. We got Belgium, who's neutral. We got Central Powers of Germany, Austria-Hungary, Ottoman Empire, Bulgaria, and then Allied powers of France, Russia, the United Kingdom, Serbia, and then eventually the United States is going to join into that. So we have Kaiser Wilhelm II, who is leading the Germans during this war with his fantastic mustache there. And the Germans come up with this plan. It's a pretty solid plan because they have France on one side of them, Russia on the other. They're both big, powerful militaries. So they don't want to fight them at the same time. They come up with a plan called the Von Schlieffen Plan, where they are going to attack France without any warning, focus all their forces there, and their goal is, if they can get to Paris, they can probably get the French to quit. And they're hoping to do that before the French have time to actually get ready to fight. And then once the French are under control, they'll take all the troops to the other side of the country and fight the Russians, so they can fight them separately. Unfortunately, the French will notice if they start coming across the border. So what they do is they actually go through a neutral country with their army, so that they are attacking France up here where the French don't have any soldiers. So it is a surprise. Unfortunately for Germany, what happens is instead of it being a really short fight to take over Paris, when the United Kingdom hears of this, they realize that's unacceptable, we've got to join in, and they actually declare war on Germany. And if you look right here, the distance between England and France is small. So they're able to start sending soldiers over here right at the point where the Germans and French are mixing, and it makes this plan not work at all. On the other side, so when that all happens over in France, on the other side, the Russians get their troops ready really quickly. They mobilize quickly, which everyone thought it would take them a long time. And everyone also assumes they will attack Austria-Hungary because that's the country they've had the most trouble with. Instead, they attack Germany because Germany is attacking France. It makes more sense. So Austria-Hungary has enough troops that they're able to help the Germans, and they keep the Germans out of Germany, keep the Russians out, and the Central Powers are actually then able to attack Russia. But Germany was trying to avoid a two-front war, and now they have a two-front war. They're fighting the border of Germany and France, they're fighting with their army, and then on the border of Russia and Germany, they're fighting. So on the eastern boundary and the western boundary, they have wars going on both sides, which is exactly what you want to avoid if you are the general. Now, back across the Atlantic Ocean in the United States, we've got President Woodrow Wilson. He is preaching neutrality. He doesn't think that getting involved in this big European war, which, to be honest, is not they're not really clear on what they're fighting about. He thinks that is not helpful for the United States. We've just now become really a real country that can have a war with another big country and stand a chance of winning now that we've beaten Spain. In addition, we have the German Americans and the Irish Americans who came over in large numbers in the 1830s and 40s. They're now second generations, so they are obviously going to be against attacking their cousins and aunts and uncles that live in Germany. And the Irish have negative feelings about the English and the rest of the United Kingdom due to the treatment that resulted in them all going over there, whether that be Oliver Cromwell and the things we talked about there during the Wars of the Three Kingdoms, or simply the famine that sent millions of people over to the United States. They have bad feelings about the English, and they actually are hoping the Germans win this war, or at least a lot of them. So Woodrow Wilson doesn't want to upset these millions and millions of immigrants. However, most of Americans have a shared culture and history with the United Kingdom and or France. Those are where most of the colonists came from until the Germans and Irish showed up. So we've got a split country here on which side we should back in the war. Now, most governments, officials, and most of the businessmen were pro-British because they are our big trading partner. So they don't want to mess up our trade that we've got going with the big English-speaking country. There's old Woodrow Wilson, the last of Virginia's presidents. Now, all that's going on. Germany has this amazing new weapon, the submarine. The United Kingdom has the world's largest and best navy. So they are going to start stopping every foreign ship, and they're checking them for weapons. Doesn't matter where they are. They feel like they have the biggest navy. They can do whatever they want. Germany, however, has these submarines they call U-boats. So the Germans say, okay, well, you know what? We're going to sink any ship that comes too close to the United Kingdom, in our opinion. That is a violation of civilian protection agreements. Like, you're not supposed to be attacking civilians, but the Germans aren't worried about that. They figure we're in a war, and we're going to do whatever we want. It's war. So this pink part, they said anything in here, we're going to sink it with a submarine. You sail a ship in there, we're going to sink it. And it was purely in response to the British stopping ships. So on May 7th, 1915, they sink the wrong ship. It's called the Lusitania. It's right off the coast of Ireland. And it is going to backfire. The Lusitania, and here's a newspaper clipping, is a ship sailing from the United States to the United Kingdom. Rumor is it was carrying weapons in the bottom of the ship here. Underneath, over 1,000 civilians. So the Germans think there's weapons there. The United Kingdom says, of course there's not weapons. That would not be moral to use humans to protect weapons. However, when it reaches that boundary, they sink it. And as you can see, looking at this headline, there's over 1,000 that are injured in some way. There's a little over 100 Americans die. And the result is, it pisses off Americans, but not enough to want to go to war. The next big event that happens is something called the Zimmermann Telegram. So, our government gets a little notice from the government of the United Kingdom. It says they've intercepted a message from Germany to Mexico. It says if Mexico agrees to attack the United States, once Germany has won the war in Europe, they will send over troops, and they will make sure that Mexico gets back Texas, Arizona, and New Mexico that they lost when they lost the Mexican-American War in the 1840s. So we have British correspondents telling us this. The Americans are outraged. This is ridiculous. We're already having a little bit of a war with Mexico anyway down there with Pancho Villa. We've got Marines in Mexico. So this is not the joke that it seems like today. Mexico and the U.S. were already fighting. We just didn't have a declared war. So we saw it as backstabbing from the Germans that they would do this. And this is going to really tip the balance towards people wanting war. I do, however, have bad news. The British people lied to us both times. There were actually weapons in the bottom of the Lusitania, which they told us there were not. And this telegram is totally made up. The Germans didn't send that. However, the Germans now know, okay, if the Americans are not on our side, we have nothing to lose, we're going to sink everything. Instead of just sinking things close to the United Kingdom, if the U.S. is involved, we got to keep them out. So they resume total submarine warfare. And their hope is the U.S. doesn't have time to get ready to fight in the war, and that by doing this they can end the war quickly. They're going to sink American ships very quickly, and that is going to drive our president to say this famous quote that you are supposed to know. We're going to join the war, and he says the reason is to make the world safe for democracy. And the submarines are the primary reason we jump in. If you come to class, you get to see a little video. And we'll talk more about this in class. But at the same time as the U.S. is coming into the war, same year anyway, Russia is going to pull out of the war. They have a revolution. Vladimir Lenin is able to take over. The Bolshevik Party is going to be the party that takes over, and they are going to be using Karl Marx's communist principles. And the big reasons that this revolution happens is, as we talked about during the imperialism period, they lose the war with Japan, the Russo-Japanese War, which makes them look weak. They've got this huge, poor class of peasants with no land, just like what happened in France. People see the Tsar as being incompetent, the Tsar, the king. He's lost these wars. We've got people starving to death. And then he goes into World War I, and his soldiers are not armed. There's lots of instances where the soldiers show up for battle, and only the front line has actually fired a weapon before. Everyone else has been practicing with wooden guns. So the first time they actually shoot a gun is in battle, and the result is the casualties in Russia are way higher than the people they're fighting. They have more soldiers, but the guys are poorly trained, and so they die, in most cases, at about twice the rate of who they're fighting. And they're just counting on the fact that they have large numbers is going to carry them through. And what we end up with is communism, which we all know is really socialism, but they're called the Communist Party. So the Bolsheviks are a socialist group who takes over, and they start using communist ideas to run this country. So it's a big experiment. This is the first time we see a country using Karl Marx's ideas, and it's very appealing to a lot of people, particularly poorer people in these countries, including the United States. There are a lot of people who thought maybe this is a good idea. Lenin is going to institute something called the New Economic Policy, which we'll talk about next time, and then eventually Joseph Stalin takes over. We'll talk about all of that next time.